Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily LFC newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast, where we are picking up the pieces after the rarest things, which is of course a Liverpool defeat, which we saw last night at the Etihad Stadium. I'm Sean Bradbury, back in the hot seat today. Your regular host, your lockdown host, Guy Clark. His position has of course become untenable after last night's shambles. We've done away with him, and I've swooped in like Allardyce to steady the ship, get us through to the end of this season and see how we go. So yeah, we'll be looking back on Thursday's 4-0 defeat, touching on some of what Klopp said in his press conference today, and then previewing Sunday's game against Aston Villa at Anfield, where hopefully the Reds can bounce back to form. To do all of that, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a fine hat-trick of the Echo's reporters. First of all, we have Paul Gorst. Gorsty, how's tricks? You doing okay?
Not bad. Been a busy week. Can't remember the last day off I had, but that's what's to be expected when Liverpool win the Premier League, I suppose.
True, this is true. We also have Ian Doyle, who was at the Etihad to the Echo last night. Doyle, how are you getting on?
I'm bored. Really, really bored. Yourself?
I'm not bad. And I'll see it as my challenge over the next 35 minutes to enliven you. You know, let's I'm sure we can talk about that. And we also have Mr. Matt Addison. Matt, how are you keeping?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Even a 4-0 defeat can't dampen my spirits. Yeah, still enjoying it and still revelling in a title victory. Excellent.
We like to hear it. Well, we'll start with that 4-0 defeat, unfortunately, and just get a general overview of how the game panned out. So we'll start with you. You were in the press box last night, and a strange experience, I imagine, in the press box, but just a stranger night unfolded on the pitch.
Yeah, it was all very, very weird all round. I mean, it's not the first game that I've done with no crowd there. The interesting one at Anfield, you kind of, weirdly, you felt a little bit more involved, even though you were miles away from the pitch. But at Man City, anybody who's been there will know that the press box there is right in front, basically right in front of the dugouts almost. You can see them. And of course, with all the players socially distancing, they were almost basically backing up onto where I was sat. So you got a good idea of what was going on, but it just all seemed a bit flat, even before the game. I mean, everyone's seen the Guard of Honour, which, you know, was proper half-arsed from Man City. And I mean, I mentioned in my stuff, I don't even blame them. I mean, to be honest, what they're about to play a team who've just beaten them to the title, they'd be absolutely fuming about it. And they expect to just all line up and just clap them onto the pitch. It's like, well, you know, I know other people don't agree with me over the Guard of Honour. Some people think it's one of these things. I think I'm right in saying Liverpool are going to get this for every single game now between now and the end of the season. So, you know, by the time he gets to like the fifth one, I mean, Liverpool players just be like, let's just get on with the game. So I'm not really a massive fan of that. And it's a weird one, really. I thought Liverpool started quite well, but then it became obvious after the first couple of minutes, you could just see it. The whole thing was a bit slack. Liverpool knew that, I mean, Klopp said it today in his press conference, City had nothing to lose and Liverpool had nothing to win. You know, the title's done. Liverpool's season is over, basically. City's isn't. They could still win the FA Cup, and then obviously they got the Champions League coming up, and they're preparing for that. So it's a massive deal for them. And they had the whole motivation of putting one over the team that beat them to the title. So I wasn't massively surprised Liverpool lost. I was a bit surprised that they got beat 4-0, but it could easily have been about 10. Let's be perfectly honest about this. Liverpool could have lost by loads, but you know, Liverpool did have one or two chances, and if Salah or Mane score those early ones, and if Addison is sent off for the handball, which I still don't understand why people have made a bigger deal of that, he handled it outside the area. That's the field he should have gone. So, you know, overall, you know, I mean, Klopp was a bit. What's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say a swear word there, but I'm not going to say that. He was a little bit tetchy, shall we say, on Sky by all accounts after the game. I haven't seen it, but it's a little bit different when he did the presser with the rest of us. He was a bit more calm then, and he was fairly, you know, as I'm sure Gorst will mention in a bit, he was fairly not so much laid back, but he was quite accepting of what had happened on Thursday night when he was talking earlier today. So overall, it was just the performance of the team that's champions who have been celebrating being champions for the past 8 days, and I suspect that's probably what it was. No matter what Klopp says about attitude and whatever have you, if you've got players like Robertson running out of position like he never ever does, and you got Gomez just, when have you seen him play so badly, then they're going to get beat.
How about you, Gorsty? Did it come as a surprise? Because I suppose defeats have been very rare this term, aside from that rough little patch of form a few months back when I think there was 4 in 6 games, wasn't it, in all competitions? But no one was surely expecting a 4-0 rout ahead of kick-off last night.
No, the defeat wasn't a surprise, because I think Manchester City had the bit between the teeth, and it was on them to kind of prove that, okay, you're 23 points clear here, but you're not going to come here and continue to march on. So I think they kind of had the onus on them to deliver a bit of a statement. And obviously Liverpool lost there last season. It was their only defeat there, wasn't it? So I wasn't surprised that Liverpool lost. We do our betting predictions for our wider company for the pools, and I think it's the only game this season that I've actually tipped Liverpool to lose, and I wasn't surprised at all. I think the only thing that shocked me was the manner of the defeat. 4-0, and as Doyle says, it could quite easily have been 5, 6 or 7. Liverpool did have their chances themselves, but you never really felt like they had the conviction to take it. There was a chance early in the second half for Sadio Mane, and it looks like he gets caught in about 3 or 4 mans, and he just almost ran past the ball, and it ran to nothing. Andy Robertson had probably his worst game in a Liverpool shirt. Joe Gomez was well off the pace. Gini Wijnaldum was anonymous. Just a really poor night at the office for Liverpool. But the fact that he was celebrating on Formula dance floor a week ago, it tells you all you need to know. Liverpool have wrapped the season up in record-breaking style, in stunning style, and now it's just a case of, can they stay focused for the remaining 5 games to chase down that point tally? Hopefully they will, but yesterday was certainly an off night from a performance point of view, even if there is no shame in getting beat at Man City.
And what did you make of it, Matt? I think it stood in such sharp contrast, really, to the Palace game, didn't it? You got a 4-0 win and a 4-0 defeat, and I think that was one of the standout home performances of the season, really, last week. And then 8 days later, this happens. What did you think overall?
Yeah, it was a surprise, obviously. Whenever Liverpool get beat, it's a massive shock these days. But certainly the sort of margin of the victory for City, I think, certainly would have come as a shock for most Liverpool fans. But I suppose it just shows really what we knew going into the game, which is if a team's an off day against Manchester City, they can do this. They are clinical, and they do have a lot of good players. And I suppose if you're trying to make a positive, if there was any from last night, it's that this Liverpool team are 20 points clear of a Manchester City team who quite clearly are exceptional. So, look, it was just one of those nights. Nothing really went right for Liverpool. I thought the first 20 minutes they did okay. They could have easily gone a goal in front, and maybe it would have been a complete different game had that happened. But as soon as that first goal went in, it never looked like Liverpool would get back. And obviously the scoreline just got bigger and bigger. And yeah, as Doyle said before, I think it was in the end 4-0 almost flattered Liverpool in a way, even though for the first 15-20 minutes it didn't look like the game was going to go that way. By the end of the 90 minutes, it could quite easily have been much more.
These games then, Doyle, between Liverpool and City, I mean, they're always tense, aren't they? We've seen some that have been decided by the absolute finest of margins, mere millimetres, really, if you think back to recent seasons. But then you also see ones where, one team will kind of steamroll the other, if not for the entire game, certainly for a patch, a half an hour spell maybe, and they'll get a few goals. Do you think, obviously, it would be quite rich to claim that Liverpool deserved anything from that game? They absolutely didn't last night. But like you said before, they started well at least. And do you think if there were any chances had gone in, it might have been different on the night?
Well, they would have got beat 4-1 then, wouldn't they? I think they were always going to lose that game. They were always going to lose. It doesn't matter. They could have scored 3 and they'd have still lost. I just think it was one of those where City City wanted it more because they did want it more. They thought they were putting out a statement, but I don't think Liverpool will see it that way. Klopp said it, didn't he? I didn't need reminded that Man City are really good, because we knew that anyway. I mean, we didn't really learn anything in that respect. We knew that if, as Gorst said, if you don't put in 100% or you're not right on your game against City, you're going to get tonked. And that's exactly what happened. Interesting for me is that this whole Project Restart, no fans, we've said it before, City down to the ground, because theirs is a game that doesn't rely on, okay, none of the teams should be relying on the supporters to win games, but it does help Let's be perfectly honest about this. And Liverpool have got some of the best fans, not just in England but the world. And with Jurgen Klopp, they've bought into this whole ethos of everybody working together. And while Liverpool showed against Crystal Palace last week that they don't necessarily need that for every game, there are some games where they need that little extra edge. And if you take that away, and also you take away the edge that they've already won the league, then those are two bits that you need when you're playing a team like City. And a team like City who, as we mentioned, they've got a point to prove. They wanted to show, we are. Well, they'll probably come out of that game thinking we're a better team than Liverpool on the day. But Guardiola said it himself. We just aren't consistent enough, and that's why we lost the league. That's what he was saying. And the other interesting thing, obviously, I'm quite old, so I've seen Liverpool win the league a few times. I can 2 times off the top of my head, in 1983 and 1988. 83, he won it. They won 2 points in the last 7 games. They lost 5 and drew 2, and they still won the league. They didn't actually seed it mathematically until about 3 games to go or something, but they knew they were going to win it, so they took the foot off and they didn't have anything else to play for because they were at the FA Cup and they were at the European Cup and the League Cup had been finished. It's very much similar to that. 1988, they won it by a long way, but they drew loads of games at the end. And then that kind of form went into the cup final where they then lost to Wimbledon. So it is hard, no matter how good you are. Liverpool, what was it, 28? 20, I forgot. Is it 28 out of 30? What was 29 out of 32? How many have they had? It's 28. 28 drew 2 and lost 2. That's right, yeah. Yeah, 28 games they've won. And there's a reason why no one's done that before, because it's unbelievably difficult to keep going and going and going. You normally during the course of a season, you'll have like a little dip where you draw a few games, or maybe you lose one and lose another one. But that hasn't happened to Liverpool. It just happens that it's now happening now after they've done everything that they needed to do. I think you could argue it's a bit of a test of the mentality or mental strength, but it's also such a weird situation. The fact that the games are played with no crowd, they're playing in July, and it's the same for every club. But Liverpool, I think, are more or less the only club in the entire league now that aren't playing for anything. Everybody else is playing for something. Even the likes of Burnley and Everton, they're not thinking, hang on, we can get into Europe here if Man City get kicked out and the places go down. So we mentioned City, what they're playing for. You've got everybody at the bottom. And even Newcastle, you don't think they're not going to go down, but they'll be playing in the sense of, well, we could have some new owners soon, and who knows what's going to happen with the team and the squad. So while some Liverpool and Liverpool kind of, a lot of their players know they're not playing for their futures because from what we're led to believe, they're not going to be signing hardly anybody. So it's a bit of a strange one. It's their own professional pride they're playing for now. And while people will say 100 points, it won't really matter if they don't get it. They've already done what they needed to do, and that was win the league.
Absolutely. Klopp, Gorst today, when he was giving his assessment in the press conference, he said, we lost the ball in situations we usually don't. Apart from that, we were good. Do you think that's a fair shout? Did you see at least some elements of the usual Liverpool verve in that performance?
Only in fleeting glimpses. I mean, they created 1 or 2 opportunities where it looked kind of like they were the normal selves, but it was just that lack of cutting edge, wasn't it, when it really mattered. Salah got in over the top a couple of times and Mane got in a few times. But other than Salah hitting the post, Liverpool didn't really look like they were going to score. I know he forced Addison into a save early on, but there wasn't too much in terms of like massive chances. I mean, I get what Klopp's saying in terms of the attitude was right. If the kind of, I mean, I don't think Liverpool went into that thinking, oh, well, I thought that we don't really have to try here. But I think it's maybe just a subliminal thing where it's just that small margin of drop off makes such a big difference. And when you're playing a team as good as Manchester City, and I think if you would have said to Jurgen Klopp at the beginning of the season, you're going to win the league, and then you've got 8 days off, and the next team you're going to play is Manchester City, that is a bit of a nightmare scenario in terms of who you're up against next, because you've got to go to the Etihad fresh from a little bit of a celebration that wouldn't normally be there mid-season. However kind of minor it might have been, just a one night, but that'll still have an effect. And going to Manchester City at the best times is tough. So I can kind of see what Klopp's getting at in terms of not being overly critical of the performance, but Liverpool were somewhere off their best.
How about you, Matt? It does feel difficult to say that, or imply that a game was lost in moments when it's lost 4-0. And as the lads have said, it could perhaps have been even more. So on that scale of, City being good at one end and Liverpool just being bad at the other end, where would you place it?
I think you've got to say it's a little bit of both. I think obviously Liverpool made individual mistakes, none more than Andy Robertson. It was probably certainly defensively the worst we've seen him play in a Liverpool shirt. And, as we've said already, like when you do that against Manchester City, they are going to punish you. And I think, right from the get-go, City will have wanted to almost prove a point and change the narrative, really, because I think going into next season, it's kind of important for them that they see themselves as a team that can catch Liverpool when Liverpool are going to win the league, potentially by a record points margin. It was almost an opportunity for them to prove to themselves that, okay, we are miles behind, but we have got the capability next season of bouncing back and catching Liverpool. So I suppose for them it was important. I just think, for whatever reason, whether it was a disrupted 8-day break between matches, whether it was the sort of just the lack of intensity generally, whatever it was, Liverpool were nowhere near their best. They couldn't really string passes together as they would normally do. And there was a couple of opportunities early on for someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold to play in Sadio Mane or players like that over the top. And normally Liverpool would get that right. And for whatever reason, they didn't. So, yeah, when you combine the fact that Liverpool were well off their usual standards with the fact that City were probably slightly better than what they have been quite a lot of the time this season, it was only going to end up one way. But look, I don't think we should overblow it or anything like that. I just think it was just one of those nights. Liverpool have already won the Premier League title, and they've shown plenty of times this season that was very much a one-off. I mean, certainly, doing the debrief last night, we had lots of questions about, does this show that Liverpool need to go into the transfer market or things like that? And, I think that was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, to say the very least.
I think there is one worrying trend which a couple of us picked up on, is the fact that that's now 5 away games in a row where Liverpool have failed to score. And that's the last time they did that was 1992. The Premier League hadn't even started then. That's how long ago that is. I mean, Matt probably wasn't even born then. You weren't, were you? Exactly. Yeah, it was
5 years before.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's how long ago it was. So I think while Klopp's saying one thing to the public, I think, okay, well, it's really hard to judge in these, like this next month or whatever have you, for all the teams, not just Liverpool. But, the fact is that's for a team that prides itself on scoring that many goals, they've just stopped scoring away from home. And is it because of the midfield of teams started working them out how to play against them? I mean, Everton just put everybody, Atletico did as well. Man City was slightly different. Watford was even worse than the Man City game, if we're being honest. And what was the other one? Chelsea in the Cup were, okay, it was half a team, but they still didn't, they really looked like scoring that afternoon, that evening, either. So, I mean, okay, let's be honest as well. As Matt said, look, they've won the league by 7 games to go. If you'd have said this at the start of the season, we'd be worrying about them getting 4-0 by Man City, but they'd already won the league. And it's July, and there's no fans watching. You'd be like, what? But you'd have taken it. So I'm not massively concerned. Thing is, if there are any problems, Jurgen Klopp and his staff will have noted them, and I would imagine we might see a slightly different team playing against Aston Villa on Sunday, and I'm sure we'll come on to that.
We will indeed. Just while I got a brief mention there, Gorst, in your analysis, you touched upon the idea of whether recruitment questions have been raised by last night. And like Matt said, it's not a knee-jerk thing, and what you wrote absolutely wasn't. But do you think there is potentially an emerging priority now in terms of a centre back? When we saw Fabinho have to go there and do a job, and maybe you can get away with that in a certain game at home to someone where Liverpool are going to be on the front foot throughout. But it did look a little bit exposed against City last night.
Yeah, I someone tweeted me. I think it was a little bit smug. It was a bit like, so sure, do you still think that Liverpool don't need to buy anyone? And I'm thinking, this is a one-off game. Liverpool 23 points clear before the game kicked off, so they're not in any desperate need to bring in a raft of transfers. But the fact that Liverpool started the game with just 2 fit central defenders, and Klopp has admitted that he was worried of leaving Joe Gomez on in case he got a red card and leave them down to just 1 in Virgil van Dijk. That's why Fabinho had to play as a centre back. And I didn't write what I wrote, basically saying Klopp needs to have a serious look at this and think that a central defender could be on the cards for some. I didn't write that because of this one-off game. The fact that Joel Matip is probably ahead of Doyle Lovren in the pecking order in terms of central defenders. He's played 9 Premier League games all season, just 2 this calendar year. Before he got brought in the Merseyside derby, his most recent appearance in the Premier League was as a 90th minute substitute in a 3-2 win at West Ham in February. Before that, it was a 1-1 draw at Old Trafford back in October. So he has just had a completely disrupted season once again because of injury. And Lovren hasn't fared much better. He's only played 10 Premier League games. So there's question marks over the quality of Lovren anyway. That has raged on for years. You can talk all day about one. And these two cannot be relied upon to play, a significant portion of the season. And it's always been that way, long before Van Dijk came in, long before Gomez was established as a first-choice centre-half. If you go back to when it was those two as a first-choice partnership, they very rarely played a string of games together. And I think perhaps something has to give now where maybe one of them could be moved on and they should be looking at bringing in another centre-back.
I'm going to say about Lovren then. They missed him last night, which I know that a lot of people on social media won't like that, but I think I'm right in saying now, in the last 8 games Liverpool have played City, Lovren started 6 of them. And the 2 that he didn't start, they lost them both. Because he played both games against City in the Champions League. Last season was 0-0. He's only lost 1 of the 6 that he started in the 2-1 game at City last year. But all the rest, he won the 2 games in the Champions League, the 0-0, the one earlier this year, and I can't remember what the other one was. So there you go. Maybe that was the key. Should have played Lovren if he was fit. But so that's it. So in fact, that completely underlines Gorst's point. When he was actually needed, he wasn't there. And that's been the case with Lovren probably ever since the Champions League final, to be honest, though, the 2018 one, when he then went into the World Cup with his strange stomach problem, which let's be perfectly honest, he did exactly what we'd all do. Oh, hang on, you can play in a World Cup final, you got a bit of a sore stomach, you're going to play? He's like, yeah. And then his Anfield career's gone backwards since then.
The other thing in terms of squads and transfers that last night underlined, I thought, Matt, was it just shows that Liverpool and City have got 2 entirely different business models, haven't they? They've got 2 systems of building a team and building players around that. And you saw that when Williams came on for Trent, didn't he? It's one academy product for another. And I think City traded one multi-million fullback for another when Cancelo came on for Walker and Mahrez and people like that. It always kind of is emphasised when Liverpool plays City, isn't it? And in some ways, you kind of think when you look at it like that in terms of squad depth, it just highlights how well they've done this season.
Yeah, I think it underlines the job really that Jurgen Klopp has done, doesn't it, to bring through these players and have that trust. You see, obviously, Phil Foden, I thought was exceptional for Manchester City, but he's the exception to the rule, isn't he? We've seen a number of players come through at Liverpool, whereas that obviously hasn't been the case at Manchester City. So, yeah, it's certainly when you look at it like that and you look at the figures they've spent, as you say, just on fullbacks, forget the rest of the team, they've spent huge amounts there. It does sort of show the sort of differences between the 2 sides. But again, it just underlines how impressive Liverpool have been this season to be so far ahead, having spent much less, having spent nothing pretty much for the last couple of transfer windows to even be in contention for a title, forget to win it by so many points is just so impressive. But I don't think Liverpool fans should want the approach to change or for Liverpool to become a Manchester City. Obviously, that's impossible in terms of the actual finances, but I don't think there should be any envy or anything like that because, you look, say, at Nico Williams, is he, a good enough player to come in and be the backup next season? I think probably yes, he is. Would you rather Liverpool went and spent 50, 60 million pounds on a player who would sit on the bench or bring through a young fullback like Williams? For me, I think you'd go with Williams and go with the youth and sort of try and do it almost the admirable way rather than going out and spending huge amounts. But yeah, as you say, it does underline the job that Jurgen Klopp has done. And I suppose that was part of the reason that Liverpool brought him in, because he is a coach who will work with that model and trust those players. And I think next season, not just with Williams, but with Harvey Elliott, with Curtis Jones, with people like that, we're going to see that much more.
I would hesitate, Doyle, to ever call a 4-0 defeat a blessing in disguise. And I'm not quite going to do that. But do you think in some ways this could be meaningful for next season in the sense of Klopp using this as a bit of a lesson to avoid complacency, perhaps? I know you can maybe say that this was an exercise in complacency itself, but, we've seen him before. Think back to those early days in his reign, like the Crystal Palace, when he said he'd never felt so alone, taking the players in front of the Kop after the draw against West Brom, even that Norwich game where, the crazy comeback and his glasses went everywhere. Do you think this is something he can almost turn into a reference point and keep them on their toes for next season?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I mentioned it in passing in the stuff that I wrote yesterday that it could prove it, but I don't think they needed it, really. They didn't need reminding Man City are good. You also didn't need reminding that when they play against a good team, if they're not at the best, then they're probably going to lose. That just underlines more the fine margins that this Liverpool team has between success and failure. I mean, it was Benitez, wasn't it? Rafael Benitez who says, look, the only way we're ever going to win the league is by being 100% perfect. And it's turned out that's exactly what Liverpool needed to do to win it in the end. 97 points last year wasn't enough. So they've had to do it the hard way. And I think in that sense, it's just a reminder of that. Look, they won the Champions League last year, having lost 3-0 to Barcelona. So they did that the hard way. So, they don't do things easy. But the one case where they have actually done something and got it done in such record time, you see what happens when they get the job done and the standards slip. That's what can happen. So in that sense, I don't think it's complacency. It's more of a reminder of, he even said it today, didn't he? He says, look, we have to be 100% in all of the things that we do, in all the, the smaller details or the little details, as you call them, the little moments. And that's what made the difference. That's always been the case. And I think it was Arsenal won the league 98. They won on the way to the double that year. They won it. And then they played Liverpool in the next game, and Liverpool won 4-0. And the next season, Liverpool were pretty atrocious. So I'm not sure. I don't think Man City are going to be terrible, but I wouldn't be too worried about Liverpool just because they lost 4-0 at Man City.
That reaction, I think we touched briefly on this before, Gorsty, but Klopp, when he was speaking to Jeff Shreves afterwards on Sky, he was a little bit frosty, it's fair to say. But I thought it was interesting what Roy Keane said when he was reflecting on it, because he almost pointed to the fact that anger from Klopp and that the will to win and what it meant to be defeated by a rival and just be defeated heavily and maybe even just be defeated at all was what's been driving Liverpool on this season. Do you think was it good to see in some ways, that response?
Yeah, I think you'd see it more, but Liverpool don't lose very often, do they? I mean, I think there's a handful of examples. You can look at Jurgen, but he's been a little frosty and spiky after the defeat, and people who don't support Liverpool would look at that and think it's sour grapes and he's a sore loser and it's a bit distasteful. People who do support Liverpool look at it and think, yeah, well, he's a good loser. Show me a good loser and I'll show you losers, as the old saying goes. I mean, I've got no real problem with it, to be honest. I mean, it makes it better for us, doesn't it, as people who cover it, and we're looking for quotes that are a little bit out the ordinary and a little bit interesting and a little bit fierce and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, bring it on, I say. And the only problem is you don't see it enough because Liverpool tend to win the game. So, yeah, what I'm all for personally.
Matt, just before we move on, and any concerns now that the gap's been reduced to a mere 20 points?
Not particularly, no. As we say, it just underlines the job that Liverpool have done, doesn't it, this season? The fact that we are sat here comfortably with a few games left to play and Liverpool are Premier League champions. The fact that they've lost 4-0 makes absolutely no difference whatsoever, really. And I'm sure, Jurgen Klopp wouldn't have been too pleased. I thought Jordan Henderson actually as well, the way that he played right the way to the end, I thought his attitude and sort of leadership was good to see as well. But I'm sure, look, we'll see a reaction at the weekend, and you wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool just got back to winning ways again very, very quickly.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to Villa, and just before we do so, a little reflection on what Klopp said in his press conference, which we've kind of already touched upon. But yeah, he was mainly reflecting on City and how returning to Mel Wood kind of perked his spirits up a little bit after he was understandably a little bit irked last night. But the most notable thing to come from the press, I think, was when he was discussing the possibility of youngsters getting an opportunity for the remaining few games. Now, Doyle, you did the initial breakout story for us on this, and Klopp's quote was quite a colourful one. We don't give Premier League games out as Christmas presents. What did you make of his comments?
I know what he's trying to say. He was quite interesting, wasn't it? He's saying, "Oh, you want me to play the youngsters? Then if they play and we lose, everyone's like, what are you doing? You just lost your focus." So he was underlining the problem that he has there. I mean, I almost think it's all smoke and mirrors. I think some of the youngsters will play between now and the end of the season. I wonder whether or not. I think they need 5 appearances to get a Premier League winners' medal. Jones, Elliott, and Williams have all played twice now. So another 3 substitute appearances each at the very least over the next 6 games. I think they'll probably allow that, and I think they will want to. Certainly, looking at Curtis, I think Nico Williams, as Matt said, I think he's definitely one that they know. I mean, I think it was September time he started training with the first team, and Klopp absolutely straight away loved him, and you can see that from the way he acts with him, and he's given him these opportunities. I mean, he played at Stamford Bridge, didn't he, in the FA Cup in that game? So that's a massive game, and he gave him an opportunity there, and he played in the derby as well against Everton in the FA Cup. So he's given his opportunities. I think the youngsters, some of them, I think they'll all. Jones and Williams will probably start a game between now and the end of the season. I'd be surprised if Harvey Elliott did. But in terms of giving away Christmas presents, Klopp, I think, is partly saying that keep the feet on the ground, keep the youngsters' feet on the ground as well, because they might be thinking, "Oh, we got a chance of playing here," but you've got to earn your place. And I think certainly 2 of them have certainly earned, I reckon, a starting role. I mean, Harvey Elliott will in the future anyway. He's only about 12, so he's still got a long way to go. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. He'll be playing some games next season without doubt. So I think Williams and Jones will both feature starting a game in the Premier League this season.
Gorsty, this little mini run now, it's Villa, Brighton, Burnley. Do you think this, in a way, is the chance to see a little bit more of them before the last few games? Is it Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle? Maybe it gets slightly harder towards the end. So I think next week could see an opportunity.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I like what we've seen of Nico Williams already. He come on against Palace and could have scored, actually. He come on and made a real impact. And as soon as he come on yesterday, a little bit of a more difficult one getting thrown in, a 4-0 against Man City at the Etihad. But his first involvement was a decent cross for Salah, who forced a save from Addison. So looking forward to getting to see him a little bit more over the next few games. Love Harvey Elliott. Think he's going to have a top career ahead of him. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of him as well. And obviously Curtis Jones, who seems to be the one to step into that Adam Lallana role next season. So all 3 have got huge futures. So, I mean, it's as good a time as any to kind of plug them in, throw them into the mixing. And I agree with Doyle a little bit, thinking maybe Klopp is being a little bit of a smoke and mirrors there, and it's all kind of a message to the players. You might think that they're going to be shoo-ins for an appearance at some point because Liverpool have already won it. There's some interesting quotes that will come out at 10:30 tonight where Klopp actually says these lads deserve a medal whatever happens, and if they don't get one because they haven't played 5 games, then I'll give them mine. So it's clear that he thinks a lot of them, and it's going to be interesting to see them a little bit more with the pressure off over the next 5 or 6 games.
Matt, you've watched plenty of these lads in the academy, as our listeners will know. Who do you think realistically then is most likely to get a look in over this next half dozen games?
I think Nico Williams at the moment, just because of the position that he plays in, is in the sort of strongest position at the moment, because obviously Nathaniel Clyne leaving Liverpool this summer, there's kind of a vacancy there really, where if Trent needs a rest or maybe gets his opportunity in midfield potentially in the upcoming seasons and years, that would be sort of the obvious place to go. But I think obviously Curtis Jones is hugely talented as well. We've seen him, add goals and leadership and various things to his game this season. So, you wouldn't be surprised at all to see him maybe next season step up into that Adam Lallana role and start getting a few more appearances. Maybe not starts, maybe not regularly playing, but certainly, he could certainly find himself on the bench, and you'd be surprised, I think, if he ended up going out on loan. And Harvey Elliott, I suppose you'd put third in line out of the 3 of them, but purely because he's only just turned 17. I think obviously watching him play, it's easy to forget just how young he is. But I'm sure from everything that I've heard from people around him, he will have his feet on the ground, and he's very much working hard to get his opportunity. I think it would be a big reward for him maybe to come off the bench, but yeah, I think certainly Curtis Jones and Nico Williams are slightly ahead of him in the likelihood of that happening at this stage, as much as anything for their age.
Right, on to Villa then. We'll start with you, Gorst. I suppose one advantage of this truncated lockdown schedule is the games come thick and fast, so a quick chance to respond. How do you see it? I mean, would you say it's almost like the perfect opportunity to respond, a home game against the team in the relegation zone?
Yeah, I think you've seen Liverpool's performance against Palace was one of the outstanding ones of the season, wasn't it? Certainly at Anfield. So it's a team, Villa probably in a little bit of, well, I'd suggest the Palace are a better side than Villa, so hopefully Liverpool can shake off Wednesday night's disappointments and put in a performance that we're more used to seeing them put in and put Villa to the sword and bounce back and just roll on for the rest of the season. Because I think this team deserves to be known more than just Premier League champions. I think they need this points tally to kind of set them aside from everything that's gone before them, because they've been so good. And it'd be a shame if it tailed off and died down simply because they won it, with weeks to spare. So Liverpool need to kind of put in a performance for me on Sunday.
Doyle, like Gorst said, we did see Palace demolished last week, but I suppose they're relatively safe in mid-table with perhaps little to play for. Do you expect Villa to fight a bit harder and potentially pose a bit more of a threat?
Well, I expect them to fight a bit harder. I'm not sure they're going to pose much more of a threat going forward. They don't really have a lot up top. They've struggled, haven't they, for goals since we came back to came back a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. For them, 0-0's a good result. Every point counts when you're down there, and given the fact that they all seem to be losing, I think West Ham are the only one that's won down there since everybody came back to playing a couple of weeks ago. So I think Villa will be there to be got at, but it's Klopp said they've sat down this morning and we're trying to work out the best way of getting through what they expect their formation to be. And I'd imagine that Villa will do the normal, look to possibly play on the break, definitely look to play off set pieces, and then get everybody back and hope for the best. And I mean, Liverpool will. I'm not supposed they need a response, but for their own, satisfaction, settle their own mind, that they'll probably think, well, hang on, we really need to do something here. Which in a little bit is a little bit like last week against Palace, because they'd had the 0-0 against Everton when people were asking questions, and now some people are asking questions again, and just a win would kind of settle that down and would get them a little bit nearer to, as Gorst said, getting back up towards breaking those points tally. Whether they get to 100 points, I don't know.
Matt, that game against Villa back in November, just thinking back to that, I suppose that'll always be remembered as one of the crucial ties in this campaign and showcase the mentality and sheer will to win of this Liverpool team. But must be said, they were losing the game for more than an hour, wasn't it? I was going to say best part of an hour, but 60-odd minutes until that very late reprieve. Do you think that'll have any bearing on this one, or are you quite confident for Sunday?
No, I think it'll be a very different game, to be honest. Thinking back to that first Villa game, it seems like a long, long time ago now, obviously, with the break and everything that's happened since. I think Dean Smith will set up his team to be very defensive and hopefully try and counter on the break with, basically with Jack Grealish, who is their biggest, if not only, threat going forward. So look, I'd expect Liverpool to have, the vast majority of the ball. I think it'll be a case of if not when they score. But look, it's one of those games that I can see it being certainly more like the Crystal Palace game than the Manchester City game. But it's just a case of whether Liverpool can get back into their grooves away and whether they start well. And you'd imagine that they will want to bounce back and show really as champions that, the Manchester City game wasn't the real Liverpool, and they'll want to put on a bit of a performance, I think. So as much as the City game didn't particularly matter, I still think they will want to sort of set right what went wrong on Thursday night.
Picking our team then, Liverpool side to take on Villa. A bit of a tricky one this, because obviously you had the team that beat Palace 4-0, then an unchanged side goes to the Etihad and gets walloped 4-0. Go on, let's go back to front. I think Addison as well conceded 4 goals in a game for the first time at LFC. Gorst, is he keeping his place for you?
Yeah, I think he should have been. Adrian's played 18 times this season, which is far more than any reserve goalkeeper should. So Alisson stays in for me. Gents,
are we all unanimous there?
Yes. Yeah, Lonergan, yeah.
Lonergan. Alisson in net, and then Centre backs, Doyle, how would you play it there?
I don't know, actually. If Matip or Rodri would have been fit, I'd have played them instead of Gomez. I'm half tempted to put Fabinho at centre back. I'm really tempted, but I'm not going to. It's going to be Gomez and Van Dijk at centre back.
Okay, Gorst and Matt, are you in agreement?
I think so. I think Joe Gomez was lucky by virtue of being one of the only two fit centre backs. So him and Van Dijk carry on.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect game really for Gomez to get back on track, because I don't think he'll have a great deal to do. Certainly he won't have anyone as good as Raheem Sterling going up against him.
Fullbacks then, it's difficult, isn't it? I suppose we've said Robertson had one of his worst games in a red shirt. We've also talked about Williams and whether he gets his chance. Could this be the one? How would you go there, Matt?
I'm gonna stick with Trent and Robertson. Robertson for similar reasons to Gomez. Really, I think it's an opportunity for him to just get back into it and show that Thursday was a one-off. And Trent on the other side, I think he'll want to play. It's a home game. It's another opportunity for him to get a couple more assists. But I would imagine that if Trent does start, you'd think that Williams would have a decent chance of getting another appearance off the bench.
Doyle, you think it's the first strength, normal lads, left and right back?
No, I think Robertson can go off the pub. Mill can play left back. Robertson, his penalties that he's got to play at Brighton in midweek. And Alexander-Arnold can stay at right back. Yeah, Trent stays.
Okay, and how about you, Gorsty? Cast and vote?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with 1-0. Alexander-Arnold and Robertson on the right and left. Just ignoring a strong shout for Nico Williams.
Midfield then, Doyle. This is a bit of a tricky one because you'd think surely this is where there would be a bit of rotation, especially, they did look a bit leggy last night and like they were getting bypassed a little bit. So how would you play it there? It's difficult because there wasn't anyone who came off the bench and was really kind of screaming to be put in on Sunday. But would you change things a bit?
I don't know about that. I thought Keita did all right when he came on, and he did all right against Everton. I think Keita's going to start. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain starts as well, but I'm not entirely sure where he's going to play. I'll have to have a think about that one. And I'd probably go in midfield. I'd probably go Henderson. In fact, no, I'm going to go Henderson, Keita, and Oxlade-Chamberlain in the midfield because I am crazy.
Is this how you're sneaking Fabinho into the back line as well? Or?
No, I don't know. It keeps me options open, doesn't it? I just know. I think that seriously. I think Keita has to play, and I think Wijnaldum looked really, really tired against City. He's not been, to be honest, he's not been at it since they came back, and I think Oxlade-Chamberlain's shown enough that he probably deserves a start. I think he's obviously unlucky with the own goal on Thursday night, but he was another who showed a bit more fight than some of the others. But he can't play right wing because I think Salah is going to stay. Although I don't want to jump ahead too much, but yeah, I'm going to put those three in midfield.
Gorsty, would you be bringing the changes there?
I think so. I mean, I'd certainly be starting Keita. The only issue is I think Fabinho's been decent since the restart, and Henderson was the Liverpool star man on Thursday. So do we keep both of them in, or do we drop one for Oxlade-Chamberlain? And if I do, who's that going to be? So I'm going to go with Keita, Fabinho, and Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Ooh.
Interesting. Well, Matt, I think Keita seems to be the one who's attracting the most attention here. Would you go with him first of all, and then how would you play it after that?
Yeah, I think Naby Keita is an absolute certainty. I don't think Fabinho was particularly brilliant last night, so I'm going to go with Henderson as the deepest lying midfielder with Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita alongside him. I think that's an exciting midfield, and against a relegation threatened side at home, you'd imagine that that will be okay. So. Yeah, whether Jurgen takes the sort of gamble and goes with that attacking lineup, I don't know, but I think that's what I'd be going with.
He's always listening to this podcast, so he'll pick up on our tips.
Finally, then goes the front line. Is it the usual suspects or a bit of a mix?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to look past them, isn't it? I mean, the people don't have a whole lot beyond Divock Origi, so it has to be. And I think Firmino's got to pull that finger out because he's been a little bit slack since the restart. This is as good a time as any to bag one in the Premier at Anfield.
How about you, Doyle? With Origi last night, I always feel like almost within his first touch, whether he's going to come on and have a brilliant cameo or absolutely not do that. And didn't think he's great there, although not in the best of circumstances. Would he be getting a look in for you, or Minamino perhaps?
Firmino can join Robertson down the pub. He's been desperate to get there, let's be honest. And he can also go to Brighton and start there. So I think Salah and Mane play, although Mane was not great. I thought Salah did okay against City, actually. I thought he was probably Liverpool's best player, actually. In terms of who plays down the middle, it's a tricky one because I want to say Origi, but you're right, he was quite poor when he came on last night. And it's whether or not Minamino gets another go because he's only started the one Premier League game, hasn't he, at Everton, and he got subbed after 45 minutes. He probably deserves a bit of a go at home. So I'm going to go Minamino up front with Mane and Salah.
Matt, there's some nod in there. I sense Minamino.
Yeah, that was the shout. Yeah, I think Salah and Mane have to play, and I think Minamino, I'd like to see him not just link up with those two, but with a bit more creativity in midfield as well. If Naby Keita's playing, I'd like to see a bit more of that, and be interesting to see what he can do with Chamberlain as well. So yeah, not just because it's at Anfield, but yeah, a bit of link up play. And yeah, I think Minamino deserves a bit of an opportunity because sooner or later he is going to have to get a chance if we're going to make a judgment on him.
Well, there you go, Jurgen. I think we've got you boxed off there if you are listening in. So before we sign off, Gorst, just want to touch on one thing that's kind of been a bit of a theme of this week. Klopp started really with Klopp writing an open letter to the Echo in which he addressed everyone in the city, Liverpool fans, Everton fans, and everyone. And he was stressing various things and themes, but talking about the current public health crisis and the need for everyone to be responsible, not gather, and do what they can to keep things down to a minimum. And then you were at Anfield yesterday before the game, where Peter Moore and various local authorities were speaking and addressing similar themes. And then Matt Ashton, who's the local director of public health, spoke at the start of the press conference today, just before Jurgen Klopp. But unified voice, really, the message about safety is loud and clear.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was great to see Jurgen Klopp obviously deliver that open letter to us on Monday, and I thought it was fantastically received. And as he tends to do, he hit all the right notes, and Liverpool were keen to kind of reinforce that message ahead of Sunday. So Anfield, it's going to be the first game back at Anfield since Liverpool were crowned champions, and I think there's been a little bit of a worry, and it's probably a justified one now, given what happened last week, that Anfield might be kind of besieged by fans who shouldn't be there and should be sticking to the social distancing rules and the lockdown restrictions and all that kind of stuff. So Liverpool were keen to get that message out. So Peter Moore spoke yesterday. I had a chat with him for around about 15 minutes or so, and he was just stating how important it is for supporters to stay home, watch it from the house. There's going to be nothing to see at Anfield. We're going to enjoy an open-top parade with our supporters when the time comes. And it was all very good. And the police Andy Cook from there, he said similar things. We had Joe Blott, who's the chair of the Spirits of Shankly, Wendy Simon, who's deputy to Joe Anderson of the council, and obviously Matt Aston, as you mentioned there. So it was all very serious public message of stay home, stay safe, watch the game from your armchair, and there will be no further spikes, and we can all hopefully enjoy an open top parade a few months down the line.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, on that comforting thought, we'll leave it there for today's Blood Red. Thank you all for listening and watching wherever you've been tuning in. And fingers crossed Liverpool can get back to winning ways on Sunday and save their season after Thursday night. And we'll be back on Monday with plenty of reaction to the Villa game. Bye for now.